This is Matt Brown, and you're listening to Just a Good Conversation. English photographer David Wright has documented the diverse culture of his country over the years. Everything from politics, fashion, language, religion, class, customs, and the traditions. David cut his teeth photographing the early punk scene in London, then finding work in a hospital as their photographer. He always kept his camera front and center on the happenings in the UK.
So I was a photographer, and I'm surrounded by all these people walking around looking really weird and very bright and vibrant. And I just thought, right, well, what can I do as a punk photographer? What's the punkiest thing you can do if you're a photographer? So what are the traditionalists all up to? All right, well, there's the F64 club over there with their 10.8 cameras and, sharp focus landscapes like Ansel Adams and all the rest of it. I know what, I'll just take things completely out of focus and see what happens.
I'm Matt Brown, host of Just a Good Conversation. Take a listen to our archives. My guests have ranged from Emmy winners, college professors, fashion designers, and street photographer John Free.
Most photographers feel guilty about what they're doing, so they kind of shy off. So I'm completely convinced how great photography is, and of course it's embarrassing for me too to get close to somebody. But it's so powerful that I can't let that happen. I've got to get that picture because it's so powerful. So you have to be unhuman and go beyond your instincts a little bit without being a crush on someone, without disturbing someone.
The rest of my conversation with John can be found on our archives at justagoodconversation.com. Let's take a quick break for a sponsor before diving into my conversation with David Wright. Maine Farmhouse Brands was started by Dan McCool, a healthcare professional. His goal was to make premium soap. Most people may not realize how important the right soap is for their health and the difference between soap and detergent. Soap is made from natural ingredients like animal and plant fats, whereas detergent is made from synthetic, often harsh chemicals, even fossil fuels like petroleum. Maine Farmhouse Brands makes their own soap with natural ingredients, free from harsh chemicals. So if you want to keep your skin healthy and clean, I would recommend using Maine Farmhouse Brand soap instead of detergent. You can find their body wash, shave soaps, laundry soap, and beard oils, and more at mainfarmhousebrands.com. I have got the right man on the podcast today. How are you doing, David?
Hi, I'm really good, Matt. Thanks very much.
It's your evening. It's my morning. We're a continent away. You're in England. How is the weather and everything there?
Well, I live in the Yorkshire Dales, and the weather's very changeable. We've had snow a week ago and ice, and now we've got beautiful clear sky, sun setting. I was out there taking a couple of snaps earlier on for my series, Christmas in the Yorkshire Dales, which is just, self-indulgent stuff about Christmas and landscapes and decorations.
I've never been to that part of the country. What is it like? What am I looking at? If you walk me through, what am I going to see if I'm living in your neighborhood?
It's absolutely beautiful. It's undulating green hills, and then they rise up to moors with bracken on that goes purple in the wintertime. The higher it goes, the more you become familiar with it. There's glaciation happening there because the valleys can be wide, flat, and then they rise up.
Wow.
All the buildings and all the walls are made of the sort of Yorkshire stone, which is either grey or yellow. Lots of dry stone walls between the pastures, and sheep by the ton everywhere. It's just wonderful. It's as nice as Scotland, but different and not as remote.
Okay.
And the Dales is noted because there's like about five rivers that run down through them, and that's why they're called the Dales. That each one's got its own river.
Okay. What's the biggest city near you?
City?
Yeah.
I think it might be Leeds,
Okay.
south. or York east,
Okay.
Manchester west.
Yeah. Where did you grow up? Where did young David start running around?
Well, those of your listeners who know their accents will have detected, firstly, not only am I English, but you might have noted the twang of kind of East London. I was born right in East London, sound of Bow Bells, Cockney, and all that. But the moment I was born, I was whisked off to Essex to a place called Hornchurch, which is near Romford. And so I grew up in that area. Sort of Essex became the London Borough of Havering.
Okay.
Lived there, and I lived in Essex right up until a couple of years ago, and then moved up to Yorkshire.
If I don't have an accent by the end of this podcast, I'd be surprised. Well, are you an only child, or you have siblings?
No, I had two sisters, older. One lives in America, Rhode Island.
Oh, okay.
Older than me, and the other one, she died of cancer when she was about 40 something.
Okay. Did you grow up in a household full of artists? Was that kind of something that led to the camera, or are you the black sheep of the family?
Yeah, I think. Well, I think there was always the potential for my sisters. My oldest sister is a bit kind of wayward, and she went off at 16 to sort of Spain with her caftan and her tent. But she's a hairdresser, and she met this American guy, American sailor, and so they came back, got married, and then went off to America. My other sister, she lived locally. She could play the clarinet, and she was very sporty. My dad was an engineer. I always thought that's completely opposite to where I was. So when I was about, I think, 14, he said, right, well, we need to have a think about your career. You need to be a doctor. So we looked into that, and I thought, I'm not sure about that. And then he said, well, what are you interested in? I said, well, agriculture, forestry. So we looked at forestry, and we're told, don't go into forestry. They're mechanizing it, and so there'll be very little employment. Agriculture. So I had a place at a local agricultural college to go and do a degree in farm management, and that was it, all set. But I was doing an A-level, one of my A-levels in the sixth form, which is what, sort of 16 to 19 years old, was art. And I was very interested in painting. And we got to almost the end of school, and I was thinking, do I really want to go and do farming, or would I rather go and do painting? Anyway, I decided painting, and I had a friend, he was also going to art college. So we decided, it was going to be go to art college. And how do I tell my dad, who's an engineer? But he was very understanding. He said, well, you do whatever you want to do, it's your life. So I went and did a foundation in art and design. That's 1 year. You do all of the different disciplines. And it was during that time I discovered the camera, and I thought, wow, this is not only magic, but it's much quicker than painting. I can get ideas out, almost instantaneously. So I got interested in photography. Then I was looking to think, where do I go and do my degree? And it was my mum started fishing around, finding different colleges.
Now, when you say you discovered the camera, did someone introduce it to you, or was there a class? How did you?
Yeah. You had to do a module on photography. You did painting, you did graphic design, you did ceramics, did film, and you did photography. You do a bit of everything.
Right.
And the
Touch
idea
it.
is at the end of that, you make your mind up and go off and specialize. So
what was the hook? What kind of got you?
I have no idea, apart from the fact it was magic. It was the magic box. You took these pictures, and I'd had the odd go with my dad's camera, but I'd never really thought about it beyond, I've pressed the button and he goes off to get the stuff processed at the chemist. This time, you take the picture, you go into the dark room, and you do all the film stuff with the chemicals, and then you see the latent image has become visible, and then there's this whole idea of postponing your kind of satisfaction or enjoyment. When you press the button, you don't really know what you've got. You might have an idea, but when you process it, hold it up to the light, and all the chemicals drip down your arm, and you look at it, you think, "Oh wow, that's where did that come from?" And that's the beauty of film photography over digital. Digital is there instantaneously, and you don't have that craft part of it anymore.
So your dad had a camera around the house?
Yeah, he had an old Ilford Sportsman.
Okay, so there's a little bit of exposure. It wasn't like a complete rarity that you had no idea what a camera was like the house. Did he take a lot of family photos, or?
He took loads of pictures on all our holidays, and he had slides, and we used to have a slide show, when you work your way through all these pictures with people sitting on beaches or with their heads cut off. And they were very embarrassing, but the classic stuff,
Yeah, right. Yeah, those embarrassing father photos that he took, and you look back and go, oh my gosh, how could I have ever been a part of that?
Yeah.
So you're in class, you're falling for photography. How was that conversation with your father? Like, Dad, I might want to do this.
Yeah, that's it. I've said I thought about it. I've thought about farming, and as much as I love the idea, and I really enjoyed, I was working as a full-time gardener, making quite good money in all people's houses in the neighborhood, and I enjoyed growing things. But somehow I thought, visual imagery and sort of putting down something that that you've thought about, because I was very into kind of philosophical approaches to painting. I loved thinking about why an image is important, and and I got into the Impressionists, and when I started to think about what they were trying to do, they were mixing color to try and get sort of particular results. Mm-hmm. And then we were introduced to Renaissance painting, and I suddenly realized that Renaissance paintings are not just these people up on the wall, religious pictures, but they're full of allegorical mystery. They tell a story, and you have to know the cues and what each thing means, because it's not just it's a serpent. It actually has bigger representation than being a little snake on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. So what was that first year like for you taking photos?
Well, discovering photographs in foundation was sort of just messing about, really. Mm-hmm. I did one important thing which I have recently sort of resurrected, and that was I photographed a Romford market in the early 70s, and pretty much just went along and photographed, these stalls and things as if I was going to join it all together and make a big David Hockney type joiner. But other than that, it was just lots of disasters, really.
But that's how you were learning, probably, right?
Yeah, and then I was going to say, my mum found a college in London, and she said, well, this might interest you. So I went along to this college. I took no photographs. I just took drawings and a few paintings and did this interview. And they said, why do you want to do photography? And I said, well, you can see what I've been doing, but it's a bit too slow. And, I want to really kind of get my ideas moving and, use the camera to represent things in the ways I wanted to do. And anyway, I came away from that interview. I thought, I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, I got offered a place. And later I found out that it was the #1 college to go to do photography in the country. It's the hardest one to get into. In those days, it was like 30 places, no, 60 places for about sort of 300 or 400 applicants. And then they divided into film and TV specialism and photography specialism in the second year. Subsequently, in my teaching career, I've sent students along there, and they've gone along, and there's been 30 places, and there's been 3,000 or 4,000 applicants, and it's tough, But we were lucky; we got 3 in 1 year, because it's about how you approach the interview. So there must have been something in that interview about, I don't really know why I'm here, but this is what I want to do.
So, what was that like? How did that evolve your photography?
Well, if you can imagine London in the mid 70s, it was the place. I mean, London was dismal. There was strikes. There was, rubbish on every corner because the dustmen were on strike. The trains were on strike. We had 3-day weeks. In sixth form, I was sitting there doing my homework with a candle because the electrics were off. There was no fire brigade. It was the year I think it was the winter of discontent was somewhere mid 70s. but then along came a new idea, and it started in the colleges, and my college was one of them. It was, well, we don't like all this, and we're not going to play this game anymore. We're going to reject it, and we're going to do our own thing, man. And that was the beginning of punk. Punk began as a sort of an art form. It wasn't music, and it wasn't fashion and black bin liners and safety pins. It was people just sort of saying, well, how can we do what we like doing in our way? So, for example, musicians said, well, you don't need to know how to play a guitar. You don't even need instruments. You can just bang away at anything, in your garage. So I was a photographer, and I'm surrounded by all these people walking around looking really weird and very bright and vibrant. And I just thought, right, well, what can I do as a punk photographer? What's the punkiest thing you can do if you're a photographer? So what are the traditionalists all up to? All right, well, there's the F64 club over there with their 10.8 cameras and, sharp focus landscapes like Ansel Adams and all the rest of it. I know what, I'll just take things completely out of focus and see what happens. I'll use the other end of the lens, and I had a Pentax KX with this 50mm lens that was a 1.4 or something like that. And so when you completely blurred things, you got the most amazing effects. So I started in black and white, and another friend of mine, he was doing the same thing. We both sort of embarked on this journey, and in the second year of our college, I started getting interested in Gestalt and how Gestalt philosophy is something where you have to make up the missing parts. And the missing part, obviously, in a completely out of focus photograph is, well, what is it? Because I can't make it out. And so the pictures themselves were very large colour pictures, and they were beautiful to look at. They looked like impressionist paintings, but I wouldn't say what the subject was. They had to work it out for themselves. And it caused a bit of a storm amongst the traditionalists. I had it published in a number of magazines, and there was lots of letters saying, well, why the hell do you have all that camera equipment? And you end up with this stuff. It looks like you've used a pinhole camera, or even worse, nothing at all. But it was brilliant. I think, I still look back at the work and think it not only was it radical and was it very philosophical, but it's just beautiful stuff to look at. And I could imagine if I had the money and made, say, 8-foot by 4-foot prints of this and had a large warehouse, you would go in and you would just be surrounded by it thinking, oh, this is wonderful, with Brian Eno music or something playing in the background.
Right. You look back at that young David, were you quite stunned how daring you were to pull that off?
Well, I hedged my bets. At the same time, obviously, on a photography course, you had to do the coursework, but I was taking sharp documentary pictures, and then I got into landscape and bought myself a Pentax 6.7 and embarked on a sort of a number of projects that were kind of to do with landscape and also to do with something which I call now paint box reality, which is to find semi-abstract scenes where the colours are vibrant and probably often primary colours. And if you go to my website, you'll see there's 2 series, Paint Box Reality, and another one called Golden Arches, which is McDonald's. I went to America first time in 1982, I think, or 83, and photographed the Golden Arches McDonald's in Rhode Island, one of the few remaining. And these are really quite sort of flattened, abstract sort of areas of colour. And they're just so bright, and I shot them on Exchrome E6
Yeah.
film, which is not quite Kodachrome, but you get a brilliant result with a Pentax 6.7.
Right. What was your early equipment when you were first starting out? Before that 6.7, what were you shooting on?
Well, I started on at art college, a Practica or Zenith, one of those things. But then I got a Pentax KX, which I've still got and I still use.
Wow, you still keep it.
Still use it, and it gives beautiful results. I bought that because I remember seeing an advert by David Bailey and Don McCullen, who both said they used it, and I thought, oh, it must be good. And then I got a Bronica 2.25 square because I started doing weddings. But then I wanted to get a 6.7, so I sold that to buy the 6.7, and also with a bit of extra cash bought an old Rolly, a Rolly T, because I was doing weddings, so I could carry on doing them with a Metz flash. So I've worked my way through 3 Metz hammerhead flashes, just bought a new second-hand one this year. And the Rolly T has developed a fault and I can't fix it. So I've got this old Yashica mat that one of the colleges gave me. They were just junking them. And it takes perfectly good 2.25-inch pictures. So I combined the Yashica mat with a hammerhead Metz flash so that I can do fill-in daylight. And quite a lot of the stuff that I've shot this year is all on that. And then fast forward a little bit to about 1980, I collected old cameras. I've got about 150 Kodaks and, box brownies and things like that. And my wife's worried that we don't, they're in boxes in the garage and why do I keep them? But anyway, got all these cameras, and this fella next door, this old boy, Ernie, leaned over the fence one day, says, you collect cameras, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said, yeah, do you want this? I don't want it anymore. And handed me this brown thing. Anyway, it turned out to be a Leica, 1950s Leica.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I used it and then I lost it.
No, you lost Ernie's camera.
It disappeared in about mid-1980s, disappeared completely, and then it resurfaced about a month ago. I was going through some boxes and I thought, well, that's an interesting camera. I got it out, opened it up. I thought it was a German camera, some old, what are they called? The ones that begin with C, Contacts. Or something like
Contacts,
that. Anyway, opened it up and there's a Leica there. I thought, oh, brilliant. So I've cleaned it up. I'm going to give it a test run soon, take it out.
Where did that thing hide for 20 years?
Well, more than that, 40 years. But I have no idea. They're quite hard to use. You have to have a light meter or guess.
Yeah.
They're quite hard to load and they're quite hard to focus because it's a rangefinder with a linkage, and it's only a tiny little window, about a centimetre square.
Yeah, it's really teeny back then.
It might be quite nice to do the odd thing on it.
Wow.
It's got to be. It's not a snapshot camera unless, of course, you just grit your teeth and close your eyes and just point it for the best.
Zone focus at f11 and just go for it.
But then I also use a Nikon f2.
Okay.
And I've got a couple of lenses for that, and I do a lot of work on that. That
first, 3-5 years, did you have any struggles, or were you starting to find success in photography?
I wasn't struggling, but I didn't want to go and do what quite a few of my friends were doing. And I sometimes wonder if I should have taken up being an assistant in a studio for a photographer. I didn't want to do too much of other people's work. So I got a job as a medical photographer in order to subsidize my own work. And I did that. And then
at a hospital? Like, were you
a hospital. Yeah.
What did you shoot?
Everything.
Oh my goodness.
A bit like you do for your university, I did in a hospital. And there's some on my website. It's called the NHS.
Yeah.
Just pictures of operations and people messing about in contamination rooms with stuff and dentists.
Wow. Was that
from that? from that, I managed a sweet shop newsagents for 5 years, and got someone in to look after it, so I could go off traveling and doing landscape work. And then after that, in about '87, I decided I wanted to finish that and go into teaching. So I got a job in colleges teaching photography.
All right. Working at the hospital, did that give you a good foundation for like every day we're going to do this, we're going to do this? And so kind of, instead of just kind of wandering around, unstructured, you had a little bit of structure in the early part of your career to kind of guide you?
Yeah, it was very much that. Each day you'd get in and there would be a workload. Some would be shooting stuff, some would be debbing and printing. Sometimes it would be making slides. It would,
Mm-hmm.
a bit of everything, really.
Right. How did you enjoy teaching?
Well, I loved it to begin with. It's like a lot of things, but teaching photography is fascinating. And then I moved into film and TV production. So I taught film and TV production. And it was really, I had great students. So,
And are you still in London at this time?
yeah. I only moved out of London about 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay. So you've seen London change.
Yeah.
From those moments in the 70s to, most recently. I mean, what a change it has gone through.
It's changed a lot. And it's changed from being quite threatening. Parts of it were quite threatening. Then it got gentrified. And now I don't really like it. It's not, I think it's like, as you grow old, big cities, they're too fast and too noisy and too dirty.
Bright and colorful, and all of a sudden,
And you can't drive a car. I wouldn't be able to take my Defender down there because of, they've got emission control and congestion charge and all of that.
Oh,
We're not a driving nation like America. I love the fact that in America you can just drive into a town or a city and you can pull up into a diagonal space outside the shop or in the mall or something, and then you just go in and come out and don't expect to find your wheels missing or a ticket on your car.
Especially with that 110, you would do great here in America. Oh man, you could take that bad boy anywhere.
Well, before that, years, back in the 80s, I had an American, it was a Renegade Jeep that just came over to England. It was a nice flash car. It was an upgraded Renegade, and it was like a real babe magnet. It was sort of, you drove around, and I got my brown and white pointer dog sitting next to me, leaning out with all the wind blowing his ears behind him, and rock and roll coming through the speakers with the roof off.
David and the chick magnet. And this is one thing photographers are very sensitive about because they don't teach it, but how were you on the business side of photography early in your career leading to maybe in the 80s and 90s? Did you understand the cost of what a print and how much you should get paid? And did you lean on any mentors? How were you on the business side?
I didn't really spend much of my time trying to be self-employed. I did have quite a lot of stuff published in magazines, but basically showed it and they said, right, we'll pay you £40 a page or whatever it is. And that was it. So I developed a very business-like mind when I ran a shop. So I know all about the cost of things and the bottom line, revenue, income, tax,
Right.
VAT, everything, So, but I don't think I use much of it now.
Yeah, because that's one thing, especially when you're younger, you don't really understand. You don't just take every job to say you have work, because you're not going to get any money from that after how many hours it costs you, what you got to do for camera gear and insurance and taxes. And you look back and go, I made $4 or £4 from that job, and it should have taken or costed you $1,000. So that's kind of the youthful photography mistake, is not to understand the business side.
Yeah, and the trouble nowadays is people think, well, they've all got phones and things, so with cameras in them. So, the market for professional photographers nowadays is diminished. There's a few of them still doing sport and fashion and paparazzi and advertising,
Right.
but newspaper work, they don't really want good photographs in newspapers nowadays.
No, they just want photography. They don't want great photography.
Yeah.
When did you start to feel comfortable as a photographer where you felt like you could go out on any job and you can come back with exactly what you were envisioning? Was it around 10 years did it take you, or where was your feeling comfortable point?
I think it only took a year or so.
Okay.
One of the things that I focused on was the chemistry, the physics and the chemistry. I made it my business to learn all about that aspect of it, not just about the picture itself. So, I wanted to make sure that, if I selected a certain exposure, I'd get a certain result. The Ansel Adams approach,
Right.
it's where do you picture exposure? Not quite zone system, but understanding, the limits of most film. That this your average scene is 10 times brighter than anything you can get on a film. The range. So there's that, and then there's the chemistry. What you can do with the chemistry to sort of hold back, push further, and what developers give you, fine grain or high contrast results. Learned that quickly, and learned about the cameras and the lenses and what would give you the sorts of results. So I got to a point where I could go out and think, right, that's it, got that. Feel fairly confident. I still make mistakes, mind you.
Sure.
I still make the awful cock-ups sometimes. Shoot something and think, what, or process it and something goes wrong, oh God, not infallible.
You've lived through a wonderful time of watching film quality completely change, from those films in the 70s to what it was in the 80s when it really was hitting its mark with the T-Max coming in with Kodak and Ilford and stuff. Did you notice or feel that help your photography as the film got better?
I think it did, but then I think I've revised my feelings because up until about a year ago, I used T-Max 400 quite a lot of my work, but then Kodak put their prices up, and the chemistry became ridiculously expensive as well. So I looked elsewhere, and I found I went back to Ilford HP5 for black and white, which I think gives me a kind of the night. There's a sort of softness about it. It's not got that T-Max sharpness of grain, but it's got a quality of its own. But when I look back at stuff I shot, say in the 70s and 80s, for example, if you look at the Miners series, that was shot on, I think it was Kodak Tri-X 400, and it's got beautiful results. It prints beautifully.
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Wait, okay, that Miners series, how did you get involved in that?
I had the opportunity to go to South Wales for a week, and I went there, and I expected to go and photograph miners in kind of, shafts and, just doing mining stuff and
right.
the rest of it, which I did do. I photographed loads of different things, but what I worked out from it was that I was in a place now where these people were starting to feel the pinch. We were in Callahan's years, so pre-Thatcher, but they were already starting to say, mines were not viable and the pay had to be frozen. And there'd already been several strikes. I think there's one in 73, one in 75. I went in 77 or 8, 77, I think. And I just thought I could see in the faces of the men something, which seemed tired and, I don't know, fed up with the world. And it wasn't long before it all blew up. Another couple of years, Thatcher came in and said, right, we're going to discontinue mining in Britain, close them down. And that was probably the worst thing for this country, to close down heavy industry in the way that Thatcher did. It might have seemed the right thing in terms of economics, but socially, it doesn't work. So you know, if you close, let's say you close a mine or a shipyard, as indeed they have done, that particular town was totally dependent, and it's gone, and they never recovered. You go to these places now, there is nothing there. There's no new industry, nothing. The people are, you know, predominantly on the dole, you know, Social Security. Many of them are sort of, you know, still suffering from depression 30 years on. Families have got into the rut of not looking for work. They come out of school and go straight onto the sort of, you know, benefits. What the cost really, you know, of getting rid of mining, if you carried it on, and yes, it would have been more expensive, but if you wipe something out, the country then has to pick up the tab.
Right.
So when they close the mines down, which are private, or they were National Coal Board, but say the private, you know, someone has to pick up the tab. So the taxpayer has to pay for all these people, and for years. And so you don't really gain anything. So having lost heavy industry, we don't make, you know, what do we make in England? I don't know what we make in England. There's a lot of stuff, you know, we seem to make, which is not really worth having, like financial services and stuff like that. But your average person, you know, they're not doing something purposeful like that.
Was that something you're thinking about visually, pre-visualizing going into that town or to shoot those miners and say, okay, I need to capture this, groups of men together after work or before work or in a pub? Like, was that something that went through your head?
That's what I started to do when I was there. I realized that I needed to take pictures of people, individuals. So I started to do it. Then the other tragic thing is that I didn't really do anything with those pictures. I think I printed one or two and then sort of forgot about them. And then a few years back, I was going through old negatives and I discovered them. And I thought, I'm sure I shot more than this. I found 3 rolls of them. And I couldn't find any more. I thought, I was there for a week. I must have shot, I don't know, 20, 30 rolls. But I've moved several times, and I know that I've lost quite a lot of stuff in those moves. For example, I don't have any of the negatives now of the out of focus stuff. I've lost quite a few of the Kodachromes I shot in India in the 80s. And I have no idea where these pictures have gone. I spent a day with a circus in London, and before they were performing, it was just rehearsing. And one of the things they said, oh, come with us up to the public bars at Greenwich. That's where we all go and wash and everything. So I went with them and took pictures of, you know, these public bars where, you know, they don't use them anymore, but travellers and people like that, that was what they did. All of that stuff's just disappeared. I found some stuff, but lots of it has disappeared. I was lucky enough to find the abattoir series and the cremation series and the miners. And luckily, by that time, I'd preserved some of the stuff. So all my island in the 80s and 90s stuff, it was sort of neatly organized and preserved, but the early stuff disappeared.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. Oh boy.
Well, you can't.
Yeah, I know. We especially if you haven't lived through how much film and how to keep it was back then. It was hard. It was a lot of work. I've lost a lot of my work where I've sent it off and it never came back, and then you reach out to that person and they're like, "Well, we sent it out. It was in transit, or we had it in our library and it's gone." It's
well, luckily, Kodachrome was fairly reliable, and so was the lab that I took the stuff to for doing Xchrome. But everything else I processed myself.
Okay.
I did all my own processing. I never gave it to anybody else to process.
How are you with subjects. Walk me through that process, especially like with the minors and stuff. Did you give them a lot of direction? Did you just kind of let them do their thing and you were like a fly on a wall? How did you approach
In those
that?
days, I think it's better if I talk about how I am now, because in those days I was young, inexperienced, fly on the wall. I would pretty much take pictures as they were in front of me.
Okay.
I would get talking to subjects, like if you look at the cremation series, I got talking to the guys working there and got their stories. But now, no, now I have a different approach. It's very much about, first of all, if possible, getting to meet the people and understanding them and getting them to sort of know what I do and why I do it and how I do it, and engender some trust, and maybe even show them pictures or my website, and then after that they say, all right, okay, that sounds good, and then it'll be a combination of direction and kind of snapping things, but then they're aware I'm there, but they've become confident and they sort of trust me, so they let me get on with it. But I don't adopt really a fly on the wall approach. I believe a subjective approach is my way of doing things, and I think you have to connect emotionally wherever possible with your subject. If you don't have a feeling about what you're doing, it won't be as good or as strong.
Yeah. When did you start to develop that skill? When was that switch for you from fly on the wall to making connections?
I think probably, well, as I said, it probably started with the cremation series.
Okay.
But I think it actually began in an odd way, really. It began as a wedding photographer.
Interesting.
I used to, at one point, I was doing weddings to earn money, but at various points in my career, I've gone back to weddings because I had to have a second job because the interest rate was so incredibly high, needed to earn money. But weddings are one of those things that most photographers despise and they look down on. It's not serious work. But the one thing that is serious about it is getting it right. You got to get it right. You got to get it right exposure wise, and you got to get it right to please the customer. So exposure wise, you've got to know what you're doing, and then pleasing the customer is all about, first of all, having a kind of relationship with them. So you generally meet them in advance, and you kind of need to talk to them, not just say, well, I'm just here snapping away. And they're more demanding now. I mean, I look at a wedding work now and I think, gosh, it's so brilliant, some of it. I wonder how they got that. They must have really worked hard with their subjects. But it was in the late 70s when I started doing weddings and realized that that's the way forward. You're not a fly on the wall. Most weddings, they might want it to look a bit like it's sort of documentary or it's vernacular, but actually it's all highly posed.
Right.
And so you've got to have that relationship going with them. And I realized that once you build that relationship, people are really quite happy to help you with your job, So they'll do pretty much what you want, or they'll let you do how you want to do it around them.
Yeah, weddings are a great learning place, especially if you could be like the second shooter and not have the primary responsibility, but be able to just make some beautiful photos early in your career and then work your way to the one spot. It's a really great place to learn. Yeah, and see. I mean, you can make, like you said, there are some stunning wedding photos being made today that were never thought of 50 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah. How were you as a photographer? Were you put it on single frame? Were you a shoot a lot of frames? Because we had film, so we couldn't really just blow through 20 rolls a day. We had to be very due diligent, but how were you as in your style?
Yeah, I'm more decisive moment than splattergun. Couple of frames of each sort of scene or thing, is it. Now, if I let's say I was in London photographing the climate change protests, that doesn't mean I take 2 frames in the day and that's it.
Right.
But I might see one thing and think, oh, I'll take two. Like there's one particular picture, it's of a woman looking, she's quite close up to me, and she's got a policeman just standing behind her, and they've just arrested her, and they're about to put her into the police van. I might have even sent you, I don't know if I sent you that one.
You did, yeah.
But the thing about that is I had to set the camera, the lens had to be on, it was a wide angle lens. I set the camera on an average exposure. There was no time for focusing, no time for fapping around. I just jumped in, was about 3 foot away from her, took the picture, and then took another picture or two, and then I was suddenly pushed off, manhandled out by the police. So it's a case of there's the shot. It's got to be one of those ones. So, I'm very much into the idea that you wait and you pre-visualize, and it's all about timing and being in the right place at the right time for when you know something's going to happen, and just hope it does. And that's how I approach anything, photographic, is to try and do it in the minimum number, because like you say, shooting on film, and I don't have motor drives and all of that. I was never into all that. It's very much crafting the result.
Yeah, knowing when that moment is going to happen.
Yeah, and that I think comes from experience, but it also comes from, as I already just mentioned, pre-visualization. And I think having a foundation of painting and the idea of framing is loosely based around composition. So thinking about what's inside the frame, where you're going to stand, and what's going to give you the maximum impact, the maximum meaning, moving things out of the way by moving yourself so that you don't have, a light or a high vis jacket or whatever it is you don't want, so that, and then just waiting to see if it happens in front of you. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. How many clients did you have maybe in the 80s and 90s? Were you working off of, with whether it was magazines or commercial work? Well, how many did you have at one point?
Count them on one hand. I didn't do stuff for other people. Like I said, I was only interested in working on my own projects, and then I would get them published in magazines.
Oh, okay. So that's an interesting approach, to do your own project and kind of then pitch.
Yeah. So there was a handful of 3 or 4 magazines that I knew the editors, and every so often I would sort of contact them and say, I've got something here. Are you interested? So, they would say yes or no. And, then I'd...
Because like you mentioned India, what got you to India?
Was that one of these things where you've got to go and find the source of the Ganges? Midlife crisis. So, I don't know, something like that. But I went off to India, loaded up with the Pentax 6.7 and 100 odd rolls of 120 hexachrome, and that was it. Up to the Himalayas and way up to base camp Everest, and then back down to India and spend a couple of months going around on trains, to outlandish places like Benares, which is a holy city, Varanasi, where they will go down, and the Ghats, where they burn where they cremate the bodies and put them in to the river.
Right.
Photographed all of that, and it was just I liked it so much. I went back a couple of years later and did this similar thing. I didn't go to Nepal. I just went to India.
How did you transfer? Or did you just keep all your film until the very end, or did you process your film as you went in India?
No, it was color hexachrome, so I just kept it all in a sort of bag and hope the heat didn't affect it too much. Look after it. Or the cold. Up
Right.
in -20.
At a -20, were you worried about gear and, your cameras can freeze, things can break, you're gone that long? It's not like you can go to a corner shop and get gear fixed.
I think I was a bit worried, but I thought if I keep it warm at night and I don't let it get too hot in the day, I should be okay. I didn't go for special harsh condition preparation. I didn't stick the cameras into them, have all the work done on them.
Okay.
Just hope for the best, really.
Man, I mean, that's to have that midlife crisis and take your camera gear with you, I would be scared to death. Oh my God. Did you ever have any projects that you thought, okay, this is going to be a really good one, and it didn't work, and then you had some where you're like, I don't think this is going to be much, and then it turned out to be this unbelievable project that you were shocked that it snowballed into anything? Did you ever have that kind of yin and yang?
Quite a lot.
That's a great answer, David.
If you take, say, the miners picture series, that's actually become quite, good for me in more recent years. In fact, I've had a book published, only a small, thin one, because there's only like 36 pictures. But I've entered a number of those pictures for competitions. I won an international competition with the picture of the tired miner that I sent to you.
Yeah, God.
That lot. Whenever people see that, I don't know what it does. I'm still trying to work out how that picture works. Is it the fact that he's covered up one eye and he's just looking straight at you?
Yeah, I think it's a lot because people can never put themselves in that kind of situation. They look at these men and go, you're miraculous. I could not do that. I couldn't put that kind of work in.
Yeah. The Island in the 1980s and 90s series, there's loads of rolls of film. There's 100 pictures in that series. That's probably one of my favorite sets. I just love it. And it was done because I met my wife, who was Irish. Her family owned this farm on the West Coast, tiny little farm. So we used to go out there and, meet the family and tour around. And I noticed Ireland was changing. So I decided to start documenting it, to show my kids where, their heritage, where half their family have come from. Because my wife's mum was a family of 13 who all lived in this little farmhouse, stone farmhouse, with the animals up one end and they're up the other. So I thought it's important to document these people, and if you look through the series, it depends how interested one is, but they tell a story of a rural community that's sort of seeing things change rapidly and seeing their country being dragged into the 21st century. And the flat caps are swapped for the sports caps, and the old tracks becoming 4-lane motorways and things like that. And so they just there's a kind of beauty about their kind of rural sort of, how do you put it, really? The landscape is just kind of deserted. It's quiet. It's beautiful, but it's nostalgic. And the people, the men in their flat caps and their tweeds, and the women in their pinnies. In fact, there's one of my favourites is Bridie Linehan milking her cow, and if you can find it, it's she's kneeling down milking the cow by hand. Look more closely; she's wearing her apron and she's got her hair in curlers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, and you said it, being dragged into now. I'm sure a lot of them would like to stay how they had it and not really want a 4-lane highway and change it to a sports cap. It was a simpler time, but I'm sure they love that time.
Yeah, I think many of us sort of yearn back for those halcyon days, but many of them say, I wouldn't want to return to that because if you didn't live through it, you're just looking at it thinking, oh, I would have liked to have lived in those days. But if you lived through it, where, you didn't have much and you didn't wear shoes and, it was a hard life and you had to go out, to work at 14 and stuff like that. And you're all crammed together in a tiny stone cottage. There's some aspects of that people didn't like.
Yeah. Do you think, and a lot of it shows, especially in your 70s work, the miners, the cement work, that they're a hardy people? You guys are a hardy people. You guys can really get through a lot.
I think that's what shows through a lot of the work done in that period. If you look at, I mentioned Janine Wiedel's book about Falcon Forge, which is it's in the Midlands and it's all about steelworks and men in steelworks and blast furnaces and shipbuilding and all that heavy industry where everything was really hard and tough and long hours and 6-day weeks. They must have been really tough.
Yeah, they had to be. They had to be. I mean, I'm looking at some of these photos and these guys just, they look like they put in hours and they do it for the family and for the house and for the love. I mean, today people are bitching work, having to go to work 5 days a week and they want to work remote 3 days a week and they don't want to work 8-hour days. It's so funny how we've evolved to being so soft.
Yeah, we've changed a lot.
We really have. Did you ever think about changing yourself and getting into digital as that monster was approaching in the 2000s? Did you ever?
I've used digital cameras. I've got 2. Well, count my phone. I've got 3. I've got 2 Canons. One I use for copying. I don't scan. I copy negatives.
Okay.
So with a macro lens. And the other one I take with me and shoot color work sometimes, depending on where I am. But it's not the main thing. I just take it in case, I don't know, the light's not right or something, or it's just easy, or I'm doing pictures that I'm giving to the actual people, it's easier just to sort of give them some color pictures. No, I don't really like the idea of digital because I think it lacks the thing that I loved about photography to begin with, what brought me into it, which is the sort of, it's a craft as well as an art. It's a craft, and it's engineering and it's technical. It has so much going for it, and take away part of that, take away the chemistry, and the dark room, and you lose something. I mean, I'm not quite Julia Margaret Cameron or one of these people who has a wet collodion plate, and coats it and does it all. They're I mean, I admire them. They go right from the beginning, they make up their own album and their own silver halides and they coat it on the plates and hope it won't explode while they get it into the camera. But
David, there's only a handful of people listening to this podcast and know what we're talking about.
Well, once upon a time, silver nitrate was used in the very early photography, and it was highly explosive, and it could go bang.
Yeah, and people are like going, "Wait, what? You guys use explosives?" Yes, that's how they used to do it.
Yeah, that wasn't me though. I use film, and then I've got nice in the chemicals that I pour in, and they just do this stuff for me.
You mean you've never been worried putting your 120 roll onto your rollie that it would just instantly explode on you?
No.
It is quite shocking how this craft has started with a wet plate to now that it's ones and zeros and it's digital recorded and I can shoot it and send it to you anywhere in the world instantaneously. It is unbelievable how it's changed.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I mean, you can take a camera out in the middle of the night and pretty much take a picture in total darkness now and still get a result.
Yeah. Yeah. It's phenomenal. When you and I started, that was literally impossible. It's like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Tell me about, because we talked about it before we hit recording, and I during the research, it's the fun part. The F8 group, the project in which you started, where was that? Was that just out of love? Was that something like you guys sat together and said, "Hey, let's do this"?
It was a thing that I'd been thinking about. And I knew that on Instagram there were a number of things called collectives. There was one called the Northern Collective, I think. And I approached them and said, I don't live up north, but I'd be interested in joining. But it didn't come to anything. And I've noticed they've since, I don't know, disappeared. But I thought it would be good to set up something a bit like that. And we worked out what the structure would be, and we had a name. We called ourselves F8 Collective. And then after about a month, I said to my friend, I'd like to change it to F8 documentary, because I believe that it should say what you are or what you do on the tin, you know. So the moment you see it, you know what it is. Mm-hmm. So we changed the name, and we had the structure. And we started to get a few kind of well-known guests, and it took off, and it became something which was, well, it is purely for love. Don't make any money out of it. The magazine is published by a publisher, Fistful of Books. I give them a PDF of the finished thing. We all get a couple of copies of the magazine if you're a contributor. But that's it. The other guy, he makes the profit if there is any, and I help him sell it because I want to see my pictures in print. So I've been in all 16 of the issues because I was trying to get work published, and the publishers kept on saying, "No, we're not interested, or we can't do that for you." Or magazines, "No, we're not. We don't really want that work at the moment." So I thought, well, I've got to do something. So that's why the magazine started up, so I could see my work on paper.
Right. It's totally different having it on paper than having it on your computer. It's not the same at all. Having it on a nightstand or handing it to someone as a gift, it makes all the difference in the world.
And I think it's a really good quality finish. You know, it's on very good quality paper. It's got a slightly stiffer cover. It's what's called perfect binding, sort of glue binding. It's not stapled. Mm-hmm. The pictures are vibrant if they're in color, or they're sort of good saturation, black and white. They all have they've definitely got captions, but some have got long narratives associated with them. Like, that's one of the reasons I started with my friend, because we thought long narratives were a good idea because they help people understand a bit more about the photo story and what was going on or why you did it. And so, you know, it's a labor of love, and it's grown, and quite a lot of people, you know, would like to be members of F8 or would like to have their work published in the magazine. We run a competition every so often, and the people are delighted when they're shortlisted down to 20 for on Instagram, and then the winning 6 are put in the magazine with one overall winner, and they're delighted. You know, they can't thank you enough for it, which is great. You know, I love it. It's so good to feel like you're doing something that, you know, people really are into.
Right. Do you guys have a tight photo community in the UK?
What do you mean?
Like where at least you communicate, and you I don't know if you have gatherings, or especially if you lived in London, where there, you know, you guys would get together and banter and show work.
I don't know. There are some. I mentioned Martin Parr, the Martin Parr Foundation down in Bristol in something called the Paintworks. They have regular meetings, talks, exhibitions. Quite a few people I know go to them, but also I suppose on Instagram there's a kind of, you have your group of people who you
Mm-hmm.
like their stuff, they like yours, you talk, make comments.
Wow.
But I'm not a member of a photographic society or
Okay.
anything really.
Yeah, we've got a lot here, especially where I live in Orange County. There's a group of people, and they're not professionals. They're just the Orange County Photographic Society, and they just do it because they love photography, and they go out and they do little trips to national parks or the
There's
parks.
there's quite a lot of those in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's the Royal Photographic Society, and there's also the Centre for British Photography. That's a new one in London, and there are sort of camera clubs in
Right.
most towns. But I don't tend to. I don't belong to them because most of the time they want to talk about gear when they
Right.
meet up. What digital camera lens do you use? And also the work is a sort of mixed bag. I work on projects, long-term projects often, and most of the people in these sort of clubs are interested in, they're hobbyists, so they like to go out and see what they can do with their camera,
Yeah.
and that's as far as it goes. So the sort of people I need to associate with, I mean, I have conversations online with them occasionally, but we're busy working away in our own little dark rooms, doing our own thing.
Yeah. Well, David, you know this. You've done this long enough. There's two things photographers will always talk about: photo gear, and they'll bitch about editors. That's it. They love to talk about those two things.
Yeah.
That's really easy. I am jealous because you've got weather. Where you live, you have weather. You might roll your eyes and go, oh, snow. But being in Southern California, we don't get weather, and it doesn't, when I see images of people walking through the snow or bundled up because of the cold or fog or rain, it adds elements to the imagery. And you have a lot of that. We get nothing. We got blue skies. We barely get clouds. It's 75 all the time. It's bland.
Yeah. Where's Orange County is it between San Diego and
In
Los
LA.
Angeles?
Yeah. So I'm like 30 miles away from LA, south of LA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So like you, especially where you're at, you got these rolling, beautiful green hills. I mean, that's stunning.
Yeah. And the leaden skies.
Yeah. Yeah. You're next to a national park, right? Dale's National Park out there.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh.
We're the gateway. Apparently we're the gateway to it. I'm right on the edge of it.
They should give you a key, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
How you have what, 2 books? Am I correct on that? You have 2 books published?
At the moment, yeah. I've got one called Travelers and Gypsy Roma. No, Travelers and the Appleby Horse Fair, that's one. And the other one's called Welsh Miners or Mysteg or something like that.
The Travelers was first, correct?
Well, they're both at the same time. They're both
okay. How much work was that for you, putting those books together? Was that just a time-consuming labor of love?
It probably takes me about a month to put together something like that because they're quite small, sort of 30 or 40 pictures. When I do the F8 magazine, that probably takes me 1 or 2 full days sitting at the computer, laying it all out. But it takes longer getting all the work in and checking it and proofreading the text and then sort of finishing it off.
Right.
So, and I'm currently working on a book called Lockdown, and this book is 12 photographers, 14 stories, documentary stories about our experience of lockdown, the ordinary person's experience. And how do I explain it? It's what I call proper documentary. So it documents sort of events, periods of time. It's not people sitting on beds looking out of windows feeling depressed, or it's not people standing on the inside of their house looking out at you, you know.
Right.
For example, it opens with press photographer's story of COVID-1 SARS in Hong Kong, and how it came and how everyone was locked down, and then suddenly it was lifted and all disappeared, and it was a mystery. And then it goes to Barry Lewis's Empty London, which is he went round to all the sites of London and photographed them when there was no one there. Because, you know, it's the first week or two of lockdown.
Right.
So you're seeing sites that you would never have seen because, you know, there'd be millions of people in the way. Then it covers things like birth. Alan Cape Town's story of his child being born just at the start of lockdown and how difficult that was. And childhood, we've got a series by this woman who photographed children and then got them to write their thoughts about lockdown to go with it. Teenage graduation, we've got very well-known photographer Alice Tomlinson's work where she photographed on large plate cameras each of 40-odd teenagers who couldn't go to their graduation but are wearing their graduation stuff.
Oh, wow.
We've got disability, homelessness. I've got a series in it, which is my sort of project about homeless and locked down, spending 3 months with a guy camping in the woods near me.
Now, how did you do that without getting in trouble? You know, because you're supposed to be locked down.
Well, you were allowed to go out for your exercise once a day.
Okay. And you're supposed to do a homeless camp.
I took the dog with me and went out for my exercise once a day and met up with him and did that. We've got a care home story very sad story about a woman whose dad was in a care home and a relationship between him and the woman, and another one called A Lockdown Garden, which was a similar sort of thing. It's about a garden where these people would go because they were allowed to go out, all these old people. Cancer, a guy developed cancer, and then it's his journey through lockdown with cancer. But at the same time, he also did a story called All in a Day's Work, which is a book about the NHS, which was in all the newspapers. So it's really well known.
Wow.
For that. And another one, perhaps my favourite, is Kieran Doherty's series he documents his parents that he lived with for the sort of 2 or 3 years. He's a press photographer, but there was obviously no work. He shot the entire thing on old, outdated film. He's working up to a book of it soon. And I've got another series which we haven't okayed it yet. Not sure if it's going to go in. It's a lockdown funeral. So my dad died the week after, or 2 weeks after lockdown. So I photographed his funeral where only 10 people could turn up.
Oh my goodness.
So there's a range of it's really quite moving and quite sort of hard hitting stuff. I'm sure I've missed 1 or 2 stories out, but that's due to be published in hardback in sort of sometime in the springtime.
Okay. Who's putting it togetger? Are you guys individually?
I'm doing the entire thing. I put the whole idea together. I advertised for people to give me their stories. I put it together, pitched for a publisher and an exhibition, got nowhere with the exhibition, got nowhere with the publisher for a year or so, and then finally got my own publisher of F8 Documentary interested.
You couldn't get an exhibitor to show that work?
They're not interested. Maybe once the book's out, we might be able to come back to it.
Jesus. All the crap that I see in museums, and they won't show that?
Well, maybe once it's published, maybe you could go around some of your great places in LA or somewhere like that.
Absolutely.
Be my agent.
I'll call up the Annenbergs and see what they can do.
I would love to break into America. I mean, you know, we've got so much. Well, I've got such a lot of sort of great documentary photography, which I'm sure America's, it's a great market. You're like the French, French and Americans seem to love photography, especially black and white, sort of classical stuff.
Right. Do you ever get over to the other side of, into France and Spain and spend much time over there shooting?
Not really, no.
You
We
just stay
did
on
go
the
to
island?
France. Went to France this summer for a week in June, July, but didn't really take any pictures. I was just over there drinking wine, really.
You took a time out, put the camera down, and picked up a glass.
It was Bordeaux.
Yeah. Did you ever think in any part of your career that maybe you would translate over and shoot video, shoot film, do documentary work on a
Not
camera?
really. Not really. I liked using a video camera, and I taught film and TV production, but I just like. I think it's because it took far too long, actually, before you get anywhere with a result or good result. But photography has always been my passion, my love.
Right. Okay, so we talked about it again, like I said before we hit record, and this I find fascinating is this your upcoming project with the punks and the Teddy Boys. Okay, so you tell me about this because I think this is stunning that these older punks are getting together and they're going at it again like they're 20 running through London.
Well, the project is called Modern Tribes of England. I started it 5 years ago. I suspect I shall be finishing it just as I lie down in my coffin. Oh, someone else might carry it on for me.
Oh, don't say that, David. Don't say that.
I don't think it can ever be finished. As I said, it's it's my version of Edward Steichen's Family of Man. It's an attempt to sort of show a side of British culture, British social fabric, and basically celebrate who we are and what we do. But it's also about the strength and the benefits that you can get by being a member of a group. A lot of people talk about being isolated, but for example, Morris dancers. If you go out and hang out with Morris dancers, that's a quintessentially English thing. These are guys who, well, the ones that you might have seen in America are, the ones with the bells and the hankies and the sticks, and they hop around doing traditional folk dancing with sort of stringed and instruments and melodeon, and they're just having such fun. And in fact, I'm not quite sure if they do it for the dancing or the drinking, because they go from pub to pub, and sometimes in between drinking they do the occasional dance. But the groups, all the different groups in the series, I think there's about 14 groups that I'm working on at the moment, are part of what makes up British society, and some have been around for hundreds of years. Some have been around since the 50s. Some are much newer. And so tackling a group like mods, for example, I started to photograph them. And then I found that there are, they can be categorized into mods who have been around since the 70s, the real thing. Then there's mods, the new mods who like the music and the gear. And then there's leisure mods who just like riding around on a scooter with a parka on. And they join this group on the day when they're all having a meet up and ride into a particular town. And I realised that that's a good way of categorising some of these groups. So, for example, I photographed goths. Now, goths are a derivation originating from punks and skinheads in the late 70s, and they're into sort of what we call gothic music, but basically they dress in sort of what you might call like Dracula type outfits, and they have lots of black makeup, and they can be categorized as goths who have been around since the origins in the early 80s. Then there's the ones who really love the music, especially the young ones, young sort of boys and girls of sort of teenagers. They've got all the black and the spiders and the capes, and they love to listen to all the old music as well as the new goth music. And then there's the ones who just turn up for the day at Whitby or wherever it happens to be, because it's a great time. Everybody in Whitby, which is known for its Bram Stoker Dracula connections, the whole town, there's like about 1,000 people all wandering around looking like they belong in Halloween or something. And they all go up to the Abbey where Bram Stoker's Lucy Westenra met her end, and there's the tombstones, and they'll pose by the tombstones.
Oh God,
it's fabulous. It's a fabulous day. So that's a group of people who have come out of themselves, and they just love doing it. So Ted's and Teddy Boys and what was the other one?
Punks.
Skinhead.
Yeah.
Skinhead. That's my job for next year. I've got to find these people. I've got to get along to where it is they hang out and just see what they get up to and document them, photograph them, make nice pictures.
Are they normally pretty open? I mean, you're a good-looking guy. You look very conservative. You're tall and handsome. Like, is that help that your approach that you just walk in and I'm a normal man with a camera. Don't mind me.
Yeah.
Right, because
I normally go up. Like, let's say a few weeks ago, I was photographing mods. I went up to this couple and I said, "Oh wow, you look fantastic, brilliant. I love the drapes or the shoes or whatever.
Yeah.
I photograph you." Immediately they think, "Oh right, okay, yeah, let's do that." So that's the approach.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of people that could just be off put. Like, they don't want their picture taken. Like, leave me alone, man. I'm doing my thing.
They'll say that. They'll say, "I'd rather not."
Yeah.
So, "Oh, fine, I respect that. That's fine, but you do look great. You sure you can't want to reconsider?"
I'll be here for 10 minutes. Oh my God.
But, that's one approach. The other approach is discovering them first and then talking to them and telling them what you're going to do and then arranging to meet another time. So I'm just about to embark on a project about veterans. You have those in America. These are ex-army, ex-whatever, services. Right. And it's probably a portrait series. So recently I went and to an armistice. Well, I went to 3 armistice events and just got phone numbers and email addresses and told them what I'm doing, sent them my website, and then I'll contact them in the new year and arrange to go and sort of take their pictures.
Is that a tough story when you're dealing, you're going from one thing with the TEDs to now you're dealing with, veterans. Obviously there's injuries possibly involved. Is that kind of switch very 180 degrees easy for you to do, or do you have to prepare yourself a little bit?
I wouldn't know if they were injured because most of them were able to sort of walk around, or they might have been getting a bit old. They might have been suffering from PTSD and things like that. But no, they would be. For me, it would be tackle them in the same way as I tackle anything. I need to try and photograph you. I need to have an empathy for who you are and what you stand for and what you've been through. And then after that, it's okay, so how are we going to do this? And generally I sort of try and collaborate with them and say, have you thought about how you'd like to be photographed? Is there any particular thing you don't want me to do?
Yeah.
And then we go from there. Yeah,
there's a friend of mine, he's trying to photograph the remaining soldiers from World War II because we're losing those gentlemen. Your chaps were in that war, and they're all up now well into their 90s. And there's handfuls left where there used to be thousands and tens of thousands. And so you're trying to photograph the last remaining guys. I think the last gentleman from the attack of Pearl Harbor just passed away for us a couple of months ago. I mean, it's that period of time we lose. And so it's interesting that, you and I, we have this, ability to capture and create images of these people of history. And so it's fun that we get to do that and experience their lives. It's, you know.
Well, these guy, a guy told me the other week, he's an ex-serviceman. He said every ex-serviceman automatically becomes a member of the British Legion. So the British Legion is like the one that organises the Poppy Day at Armistice. I don't know if you and they've got their uniform, you know, they've all got their tie and their beret and everything.
Right.
And so I realised actually that they are another tribe.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm going to embark on this, because they are actually another modern tribe of England. They're not completely open. You can't just think, I'll go and join them, because you actually have to have been an ex-serviceman. But they're a big tribe, and they're an interesting tribe, and they do interesting things. And so what's important about this is not just the photograph, but to have some bit of story, that says what they've done, how they are now, what they've managed to achieve.
Yeah. Tell me about the drug rehab program you're working on.
So, in the city of Leeds, there's something called St George's Crypt, and St George's Crypt have a project called Growing Rooms, and it's basically a couple of houses, and they take in and look after about 20 clients who are drug addicts who hit rock bottom. They have nowhere else to go, and they realise that they just have lost everything.
Right, there's no further for them to go. This is it. That's the bottom.
But they also have realised that they want to get better. They want help, and this project takes them in and puts them on what's called the 12-step program, which is the same one that as Alcoholics Anonymous use. And they spend between 14 to 16 months, I think, with them. And during that time, they hopefully improve, they get fitter, they come off the drugs, they understand, that life has got more to offer. It has got a religious aspect as well. It's not completely inert, but because it's St George's Crypt, but they don't thrust religion down them. But they help them understand that sometimes they can seek solace or find support through a higher being or something, spiritual. But it gets them to a point where they can actually go out into the community and they can get a job, and sometimes they're offered a job as on their staff. It gets them a bank account, it gets them a CRB, which is a criminal check thing, which enables them to do certain work, because a lot of them have already been in prison, things like that. And what my project is about is to sit with each one of them. They tell me their story from start to finish, from when things first started to go wrong, often at a very young age, and it can take a couple of hours. I then transcribe it, and those stories will go into a book, and I take like a portrait of, and that, along with pictures of the St George's Crypt and the Growing Rooms sort of set up with people working in them, will go into the book and also be an exhibition.
Wow. Is that
a 2-year project?
Is that emotionally and physically taxing on you?
Physically, very taxing, because I have to sit there for 2 hours and listen, and I've got to sort of remain interested and remain attentive. That's quite a skill, and also remain observant and hope my equipment doesn't break down. So I've got to keep looking at it and checking it. And when I listened to the story, I was in tears at the end of one story. This guy, we were both kind of, watery-eyed, but he was so glad and grateful to have been able to tell his story, because he said to me, he said, this was sometime into the project. He was one of the first, but I've done a few more. He said, this is the first time we've been able to sit down with someone and just tell our story, without having a judgment or interruption or anything. It's just, this is my story, and you're able to just sit there and listen no matter how long it takes. And I very rarely have to ask any questions. I just start them off and say, okay, just tell me how it all started. And they begin and they just talk virtually continuously for 1.5 to 2 hours.
When you're sitting there, are you envisioning how you're going to do that portrait? Are you looking at him going, I want to put you in this light, I want to pose you this way?
Often I'm thinking, oh God, I wish I'd taken it just then or just then. But you can't do that. I do. And afterwards, I think about, how I might do it. It's important, I think, to try and do it there and then, because sometimes you lose the opportunity later.
Yeah, right.
But sometimes, if I'm not quite happy with it, I can arrange to do it again. And I'm doing staff and clients, because most of the staff have been clients or have been, drug addicts themselves.
Wow. That is a massive project to undertake. And that is really not the lightest thing.
2 years, and it probably take me another year or so, maybe 2 years to complete.
It's definitely not landscapes. That is a lot of work.
Well, when I started it, and the woman I started it with, she said, so how long do you think it's take? I said, probably going to take me a couple of years. She goes, really? It's going to take you that long? I said, yeah, you'd be surprised. Also, it's just finding the time. I mean, I was so busy in the autumn, I just couldn't get back. I said I'd come back in September. I was there in August. I've now just arranged to go back in January. I've been too busy between August and now with all sorts of other sort of projects that I've been out shooting.
How far away is it a trip for you for the day to go out there and come back?
I used to go by train because it was in Leeds, to the church, but now I go to one of the houses. So it's a car journey. It doesn't take long. It's like about 3/4 of an hour.
Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. David, I am so glad you reached out to me. Obviously you must have followed John Free, and you saw the post that I had him on last week. Did you guys ever collaborate or communicate at all? How do you know John?
Never heard of him before. I've just noticed he started following me, but I'm going to have to do a bit more research about him. Yeah,
he's a great guy. And I've always wanted to have him on. I was able to finally. He's battling some illness and he's getting better. And I'm glad we were able to communicate and do this. Now I've got an excuse to come out to, was it Yorkshire Dale, right? I know somebody in the area.
Well, if you do, I'd love to meet up. Who do you know in the area? A farmer.
Or if you come out to LA, you let me know and we'll hook up for sure. But I wish you the luck in all your projects, in your books. I'll make sure we link everything up for everybody to see, because you've got great work, and you have work that is meaningful. There's one thing when you're just taking pictures and you're just taking happy snaps, but like your miners, your project, your tribe stuff, that is the essence of that moment in time. There's people in those photographs, especially those buildings, like you were saying, like you thought maybe you do a Hockney and put it together, those storefronts and stuff. Those are priceless looking images. Those hardy looking people in 1970 in those storefronts that will never look like that again.
It's funny. I've just started that project again.
Did you really?
I've got about 10 shops ready to go round. They're all small independent shops. They're all the people who look like those people. And when I take the pictures, I bet you'll say, hey, were these shot in the 1970s? And I'll say, no, 2024. Because of the style and the way I'll do it.
Well, yeah, but there's no LED lighting involved, like in their windows. There's not a big flashing open sign or...
And they've got to work, because it's going to be not shops of the 1970s. It's just going to be shops.
Right.
So they've all got to hang together. So that's why I'll be shooting them. So they kind of look like they all hang together. So they become sort of timeless, really. And that's the thing about those shops. They are timeless. They're, I just love going in them. They're little shops that are full up with stuff, and it's all higgledy-piggledy. And you say, have you got something? And they rummage around, they pull it out, and they go, is this what you're looking for? You go, yeah, that's exactly what I need, And they're much better than the large supermarket stores where you go in and no one knows what anything is. You say, have you got a sort of a bulb holder with a screw thread end that I can use for a lamp stand? What, mate? Oh, I don't know what you mean.
I'm so jealous. We have nothing like that here. Nothing. Not at all. Oh, my God. Okay, so if somebody wrote you a blank check and said, David, what project do you want to do? We'll publish it. Here's a blank check. What would you do? Where would you go?
When you said to me, is there anything you don't want to ask me? You put me on the spot. Like, I'm thinking, God, I tell you what, it would be difficult, but if I had the money and the time, I would like to go back to Ireland and sort of find the travellers, because I photographed travellers in England, and back in the 80s I photographed travellers, but there's a lot of them in Ireland knocking around, and I just love them. I think they're so fascinating. I feel like I get on with them all right. There's something about them. Like one guy said to me, I said, I'm a photographer, I'm doing this project about travellers. Can I come into this field to photograph? Because there's, a load of you that camped here. Mm-hmm. Do you like Gypsy? I said, yeah, I think you're brilliant. Very fascinating. All right, then you can come in.
But, okay, isn't that sweet, though, that you have a creative avenue and you can make that connection with them, and then there's something like that's why we're so special in what we get to do. We can make that connection.
Yeah, I think so. Also, I go back to the trust thing. They wouldn't do it if they didn't think they could trust you.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of start by sort of somehow conveying to them that you're serious about what you're doing, and also you're going to treat them and the pictures seriously, not just be frivolous and like the paparazzi.
All right. Well, if I win the lotto, I'm going to send you a blank check, and you're going to Ireland.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Thank you.
David, thank you so much for this time. I'm glad we got to meet. Your work is fantastic. Your books look fun. Your images are beautiful and timeless. You keep up the good work. That stuff you're doing with the drug rehab center, what you want to do with the vets, that's wonderful, beautiful, heartwarming stuff.
Yeah, and if I can just find places who were interested in exhibiting my work in Orange County, we could sort something out.
I will make some calls and see what I can do. Hey, hopefully someone listens to this podcast here and says, hey, we'll give you a shot. We'll bring you in. Because that's all you need is just one person. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys in America, and women in America, everyone would love to see this work, because, you're looking at a different world, you're looking at something else, that you're familiar with, because America's got a lot of similarities to England, but there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if people could find your work, where would you want them to go? To your website?
They can go to my website, which is www.davidwright.photography. They can go to Instagram, which is Instagram at David Gilbert Wright. They can go to Instagram at F8 Documentary. Okay. And they can go to Instagram at David Wright in Colour. And you might see me on Twitter as well, David Gilbert WR1. But I can send you those if
Nope, I got them. You're right. You nailed them. That was pretty good. It's not too often you go to your own Twitter handle, but you nailed it. WR1. All right, I'll make sure I put everything in the link, and everybody's going to go, and you're going to get flooded, and people are going to be buying books and finding exhibit space for you, and you're going to be busy as can be.
Yeah, thanks. That'd be great, and I'm sure the publishers will like it.
You enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a glass of wine. Spend some time with your wife. Warm up next to a fire.
I'm going to go and drink homemade Yorkshire bitter. I've got a barrel of it ready for Christmas.
You have a wonderful Christmas. David, thank you so much for this time, my friend. And it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with David Wright. If you enjoyed this episode, please click and hit the like button to become a subscriber to the podcast. Remember to follow the Just a Good Conversation podcast on Instagram, and you can find all of our past shows on the website at justgoodconversation.com. Thank you for listening.